Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our joint Perimeter 81 and Sauce Labs webinar. We are so happy to have you. The topic of today's webinar is Security Never Sleeps, why a secure network is a must for testing in the age of remote work. In today's webinar, after the introductions to our featured security experts, we will discuss common threats to the network and testing environments, cybersecurity strategy as a business continuity plan, and tips and best practices for securing home networks. And then we'll finish with a Q&A, so please do send over your questions as they come up throughout the webinar. We will be glad to address them at the end. My name is Karen Masosnik. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Marketing at Perimeter 81, and I'm happy to be your moderator for today's webinar. I'm very happy to have with me our security experts, Justin Dolly, Chief Security Officer at Sauce Labs, and Sivan Tehila, Director of Solution Architecture at Perimeter 81. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Justin, why don't you go ahead and start off with a brief introduction about what you do and your background in cybersecurity.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Karen and Sivan. I'm responsible for leading security at Sauce Labs. Sauce Labs provides the largest online testing platform on the internet. So we provide services for our customers that allow them to security test their content before it goes live, whether that's a website or an app or a mobile application or other content. So I joined Sauce Labs 6 months ago. I've been leading security at public and private companies for over 20 years in banking, in high tech, lots of software companies and so on. So been around the block a couple of times, and delighted to be working at a company where we're vaulting our customers forward from a security perspective while they test all of their products.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Sivan, why don't you go ahead and give us your introduction as well?
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here today. I am Director of Solution Architecture at Perimeter 81. We provide a secure network as a service, and I'm working with clients on optimizing their network architecture, their cybersecurity strategy, and improving their security posture and resilience. I served for 10 years in the Israeli Defense Forces as a cybersecurity officer, and then I worked for different defense industries in Israel. I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited to be part of this digital revolution and to help companies with our platform to secure themselves while they're working remotely.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again. I'm really excited to get your insights today. So let's kick it off with our first question. Now that remote work is the new normal and the endpoint is everywhere, what are the main security threats organizations are facing? So Sivan, why don't we go ahead and start with you for this one?
Sure. So companies today facing the risks of the new world. People are working remotely and they are more vulnerable in terms of cybersecurity attacks. We've seen during the last 2 weeks 2 major attacks of Twitter and Garmin, and it seems like the employees in both cases were weakly. And it shows, first of all, that it can happen to anyone, and also that when companies have less control over their users' activity and less visibility of their network, they are more likely to experience an attack. And that's on top of the fact that workers using their home network, which is usually not a secure one. I also see more and more phishing attacks that related to our new reality and to COVID. Social engineering attacks like phishing emails remain an extremely dangerous and effective attack vector. And I was reading before the webinar that there are up to 2/3 malware being spread by each one of those emails, and that usually 1 in 10 phishing emails succeeds. So it shows us that we're all vulnerable when it can happen to everyone. And I think the fact that companies doesn't have control on their users' activity while they're working remotely, that's the main issue. It combines many other problems, but that's, in my opinion, the main problem.
Sorry, I just muted myself because I heard there's some reverb. But anyhow, I'm going to mute myself in just 1 second. Justin, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this as well, as far as, you know, our remote work reality and the kind of cyber attacks that we're seeing as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I would underscore 100% what Sivan has said. For sure, the examples that you gave over the last couple of weeks of Twitter and Garmin and so on, where, you know, employees get social engineered and then, you know, credentials or access has been provided, and then, you know, bad people get to do bad things inside environments. And in Garmin's case is ransomware, so insufficient controls on the endpoint. I think now that data is so dispersed, it's inside of our networks, it's also up in the cloud. We've insufficient controls or visibility into those cloud environments. SaaS isn't new, we've been there for a really long time. Cloud isn't new, we've been there for a really long time. But I think security has fallen behind in a few areas, and I think that's one of them. So we need better visibility into cloud, and we need better controls in cloud. And I think that now that our workforce is dispersed and they're working from remote networks, homes, airports, restaurants, wherever, we need better controls on the endpoint. And I think that had, you know, for example, Garmin had endpoint controls specifically anti-ransomware, they wouldn't be having the week they're having at the moment. Similarly, if Twitter had better controls within their environment, it seems that there's a large population that have a lot of power over systems at Twitter, and that of course increases your attack surface. So those are areas that you know, people should definitely focus on. And then of course, when your employees are remote, you want to engage and discover solutions like, if you haven't used them already, multi-factor auth, concentrate on stolen identities. There's methods to do that as well, because identity becomes critically important as well in these situations. So I think it's time for a renewed focus for a bunch of companies. You know, never let a security event go to waste. Hopefully it's not yours. If it's someone else's, use that as an example to focus on the areas where those companies you know, fail to manage the incident from a security perspective, and sort of learn from those and make sure that, you know, you strengthen your own environment.
Okay, that's amazing input. I have seen from the audience, thank you all for letting us know about the sound. I hope that we have normalized that now. If something comes up, do let us know, because we want to make sure that you can hear everything that we're saying. So let's move on to our next question. I'm going to pull that up now. Specifically for testing environments, how has the transition to remote work created more security risks for testing environments? So Justin, I would love to get your perspective. If you could go ahead and start here and let us know, you know, specific to testing environments, what are we seeing as far as remote work and secure risks?
Of course, excuse me. So I think what's really important when testing things is to think about it for a moment, to step back. The reason why you're testing something is likely because it's not public yet. You very, very seldom want to put something out that isn't yet tested, that you don't have confidence in. So for the most part, you're testing an application or a mobile app or web content or something internal before you launch it. So there is this concept of whatever tools you're using to test, whatever platform you're using to test, has to reach into a private environment. So like with all things security, when you take a public environment and a private environment and you connect them in some way, you have to be very careful about how you do that. So because the controls environments are diverse, right? In the public environment, there's very few controls. In the private environment, there's quite a lot. And so whenever you bridge them, these are one of the areas where you know, you focus. I like to tell people when they're sort of beginning their security journey, or they ask, you know, what do you worry about when it comes to security when you're developing things? A lot of times it's the touch points. It's whenever one environment touches another, or one host touches another, or data's being transferred or whatever it is, it's usually there where you find the gaps. So you have to spend a lot of time and energy focusing on those things. So I think it's focusing on the control environment for both environments, knowing that you've got something public or something not yours that you don't have control over, like a platform or a tool or a third party. You're providing them with access to something that's not public, and asking them to provide whatever value they're providing by providing their service. And I think those are the areas where you have to carefully provide the access they need. Many tools and platforms have built-in functionality allowing you to do this in a secure fashion and allow you the visibility to understand exactly what's going on. And those are supremely important. The days of random encrypted tunnels in and out of networks where you don't know what's going on, I think those days are over, or at least they should be.
Sivan, do you have any thoughts on this point as well, as far as visibility and what's needed for security for testing platforms?
Justin mentioned the third parties, and I think that the fact that we're now using more cloud-based solutions and more cloud-based remote access solutions specifically, it's a great chance for companies to rethink about their policies and to think how they manage it, instead of giving full access to a network for our third party contractor. We maybe would like to manage it differently and give him access to only a specific application. So I think that from one end it's a risk, but from the other end it's an opportunity to rethink about the policing, to test the environment. Those are my thoughts on that.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our next question here. And I think this is a super relevant one for our day and age, what we're experiencing right now. What are your most important tips for securing a home network? Justin, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Extremely important at the moment because many of us are working from home or working remote in some sort of fashion. Wi-Fi has become one of those things that we just expect to work. It's almost in like the Maslow's hierarchy of technical needs. We food and shelter, but then I think we just assume that things like DNS and things like Wi-Fi just work. And so to a certain extent, it's worth looking at your environment, if it's your home environment or your home office or whatever it is, and figuring out what is that Wi-Fi setup. Many folks just order a device from their ISP and it has a built-in Wi-Fi component to it, and it's got a router and a built-in firewall. They just plug in and away they go. Depending on your ISP, they might have levels of security where you could say, I want maximum security, and they will block things on your behalf and so on. And you can try and figure out which things that you like to do at home that might not work. So for example, if you turn on maximum security, peer-to-peer gaming probably won't work anymore, and any of the sort of sharing applications and so on. But generally speaking, from my own perspective, I think not broadcasting your SSID is a good one. It sounds like security by obscurity, and it is security by obscurity. But if your network isn't being broadcast, some tools won't see it. Not all, but some tools won't see it. So you're gonna be hidden to a certain extent from some bad behavior. I'd use WPA2 to set up your home network. Passwords and credentials are encrypted. You've got the ability to have a non-guessable, have a really, really good non-guessable password string so that it's not easily crackable. This is a race condition. So in the early days, we had 40-bit keys. Those were crackable after a couple of days. And we've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger with those ciphers as computing has gotten more powerful. So having a really good key is a really good one. Rotating your keys is always a good idea. It's a home network, so you probably don't want to do that over and over and over again. It depends on what you do for a living and what your focus is, but you can also do MAC filtering if you so choose. So find the MAC address, or the Wi-Fi MAC address for the devices that you want to allow connect to your network. That will lock it down even further. An attacker would then need to physically get into your home to be able to get in there, unless they're very talented. And then there's content filtering pieces that you can use as well, just to sort of protect your users. Given it's your home network, you may have family surfing around in there while you're working. Content filtering is always a really good idea. Those would be the main areas I would focus on.
Great. I think those are all really valuable pointers. Sivan, I'd love to hear from you as well. What are some of your insights as far as making sure that your home network is fully secured?
Sure. Work from home model requires companies and individuals to adopt new security policies and strategies. And we see that attackers know that many people are home and they're using unsecured network, and they are taking advantage of it. I think there are a few areas we should focus on. First is awareness. It's hard to train employees remotely, but I think that if employees, even if they are not, if they are non-IT workers, if they will be aware of basic terms like patching and backups and phishing and router lockdown, for example, they will basically help the IT managers to manage and to gain more control over their activity. And we spoke about phishing, so we see many people that are educated and successful and leaders and even IT people that still click some phishing links. So I think that's something we should always talk about. And another thing is that I'm sure that many companies know that they should patch remotely their systems and their employees' devices. But I think that IT leaders should also guide employees on how to patch their home Wi-Fi routers and to teach them to steer clear of fake patches by checking patch certificates, for example. I think that another maybe practical advice is to make sure you secure your router, your home router. Many people install their home router and never give it a second thought. So I think that IT leaders should make sure that employees know the IP address of their routers, so they can log into the device, change the default password, for example, and use their MAC address or their device address lockdown feature to allow only specific devices onto their home network. Another thing that I think it's important to mention is backups. Warning workers about deleting files from devices that are synced via applications like Google Drive or iCloud. It's a must. If employees are storing data locally on their laptops or mobile devices, they must be taught how to regularly back up their essential and critical data. And for IT leaders, I think they should be sure to warn workers about deleting files from their devices that are synced via applications, as I mentioned earlier. Another important thing is to use cloud-based remote access solution. People are still using legacy VPNs, and it's clear that they are not secure and that they are not relevant in our new reality. And using a cloud-based, user-centric remote access solution is the best way to ensure the encryption of critical data in transit and at rest. And the last thing, which is also sounds obvious, but using strong passwords. We are at home, we don't have additional and layers of security usually at home, and that's the best way to ensure that our data is protected, that our devices are protected, enable multi-factor authentication, strong passwords. That's also I think a must in order to secure your home network and your remote work.
I think those are amazing and very thorough tips, so thank you. And I'm always amazed to hear how many times the issue of passwords, insecure passwords, comes up, because it's such a basic thing that really all of us can take care, but we all just kind of fall into password laziness. 1, 2, 3, 4, like our middle names. I mean, anything. So I think that it's really interesting. That sounds like something super basic that anybody can take and start applying right away. So
yeah, and also with Zoom, for example, I
Zoom,
think
yeah.
everyone were using Zoom without passwords, and only when there were all those Zoom booming attacks,
and there are
some-
sites where hackers can go in and see, open chat rooms, right? So, yeah.
There's one thing that's interesting, a common misconception about passwords is people think that complexity trumps length, which it doesn't. So you can come up with a very, very complex 10-character password with exclamation points and @ signs and all that sort of stuff, and you may learn that password and you might use it. But if you simply take 3 random words and put them together and just remember, Samantha the hairdresser.
Don't give too much away now.
No.
But I want to hear.
I'm going to start checking all of your accounts.
So Samantha the hairdresser is just letters, but that's actually a really good password.
Yeah.
And no one's likely to guess it. Well, I'm not going to use it now, and I advise anybody else not to use it. But coming with something like that, the cracking tools struggle when the length of the password is longer. So it doesn't have to be super difficult to construct a password.
I'd probably use a chocolate cake or something in the as part of the work.
Don't give us any social engineering.
I mean, now we're just giving away all our passwords, our tips, our passwords. Okay, awesome. Well, let's go to our next question. I'm going to pull that right up. What do you think should be the top priority for businesses working from home in order to ensure business continuity, and how can they achieve this? So Sivan, why don't you go ahead and lead us with this one to start? I think business continuity is a really pertinent issue now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So we've seen many companies that just recently or during the pandemic have practiced their business continuity plan for the first time. So many of them had to make adjustments on their current business continuity plan. And I think we could learn a lot from the current situation, and that's what I'm always saying. Also about Garmin and Twitter, I think again, those are amazing companies, and I'm sure they had security policies in place, but crises and security incidents is something that can happen to everyone, and we should learn the lessons from that. So in my opinion, as I mentioned before, and I will keep mentioning it, training and awareness plan as part of the company culture and company routine, it's a must. I think that also from one end, we want to train our employees, but from the other end, we don't want them to worry so much, to be worried about security issues. So I think that implementing user-centric solutions that allow the users to work remotely without being worried, and make it seamless to them, it's also an important thing. And from the other side, from the side of the IT managers, using a unified platform that includes and combine all their security needs, like remote access, DNS filtering, multi-factor authentication, and network and application policies. All the combination of all those features and the option to manage all of them in one place, it saves a lot of time, because it could be really hard to manage different solutions and to get the alerts from all those things. And why we're doing it? We're actually basically doing it in order to respond in real time in case of a security incident. And that's why we want to have one platform, in one place, to get all the alerts, to be able to identify risks in real time and to respond in real time. So when you say business continuity, I'm thinking visibility, monitoring, incident response. That's how I see it.
Yeah, Justin, what are your thoughts surrounding business continuity, especially in light of what's happened, with the global pandemic and what's that has done to our approach to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this COVID-19 pandemic is an example of probably the first time, as Sivan mentioned, lots of people have actually tested their business continuity plan. They may have these plans in place and they might drill pieces of them, but actually forcing the company to go through what we've all had to go through in shifting away from office spaces and so on, we figured out very, very quickly which third parties we rely on very, very heavily, and whether they were machined and drilled for this exact situation and scenario, whether their infrastructure can support a remote workforce and so on. Of course, it depends. It's much easier today with so many SaaS and PaaS and infrastructure as a service platforms and so on. We have capability built in there, and they're elastic to a certain extent, right? So as the volume goes up, they're able to scale and so on. So we have that advantage versus some of the other issues that long ago in the past. I mean, when we had the SARS outbreak, which was not the last major pandemic, but it was a significant one in Asia. We didn't have elastic computing. We didn't have cloud. And so where I worked at the time, we had users and offices in Japan. And when the SARS outbreak occurred, suddenly all of our employees in Japan, which we had more than 150, I believe, they all had to go home, which meant that they all had to VPN in, because that's what we did back then, right? And we had a VPN device on the edge of our network that was capable of supporting a certain number of connections. Well, suddenly the certain number of connections that VPN connections required went significantly up. So we actually had to put a new device in at the edge of the network, which of course you can't do overnight. But so we don't have to live through these sort of issues anymore, but it reminds me to make sure that I'm paying attention to the service providers that we have available to us to make sure that they're prepared for it. And have I licensed enough capacity to a certain extent, depending on what the tools are that you use. If everyone goes home, you might have to increase your licensing or your entitlements platform by platform to enable everyone to be able to support 100% remote workforce, which is basically what we all have to do now. Things will get better. We will go back to work, but this mentality is not going to go away. Now that we've had this example, we should learn from it and sort of and move forward from there.
Yeah, it seems like now I think a lot more people are going to be aware of the issue of scalability in relation to solutions and services and how key that is. So
yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. All right, well, let me pull up our next question. This is our final question, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So, we're talking about the entire impact of COVID, what we're seeing now. I think there's a lot of discussion as we move forward about a hybrid future of employees working outside of the office and in the office. So the question here is, what are your predictions for the future of the cybersecurity landscape and new emerging technologies? So Justin, would love to hear your thoughts about this to start.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time in security at the moment. So many of the areas that we've worried about over the years, we've gotten them to the point where we can live with them. We haven't completely solved some of the issues. Endpoint isn't completely solved. Identity is not completely solved. So some of the things that we've been worried about are still out there, but we've kind of gotten them to a manageable state. What's interesting in security right now, a lot of the innovations are around some of these new technologies that we've all adopted over the past, let's say 8 to 10 years. Two areas that I think are very interesting at the moment. I'm seeing a lot of startups sort of rally around these problems, and it's good because these are problems for almost everybody. The first one is we've adopted all these cloud-based services. We're up in AWS, we're up in Azure, we're in Google. we're leveraging all of these cloud-based systems for our own internal work, for compute and storage and various other things. And then we have all of these software as a service type services that we're using inside of our companies and so on. And I think that as we get further away from ourselves and we get closer to those cloud solutions, our visibility goes down significantly. We don't have enough visibility into those environments. Certainly the SaaS ones, there's an element of trust that we have to build there between the SaaS providers and ourselves. And there are some legal and contractual things that you can put in place to manage those effectively, or as effectively as possible. But then inside of the cloud environments, I've found that internal security teams, internal IT, and even operations teams with DevOps and DevSecOps, we're allowing the devs to a lot of latitude, and we allow them to be nimble and move fast in those environments. And when you're nimble and you move fast, you can cut corners. And so security issues can emerge in those areas, and we may not have the right visibility in place. So there's a lot of startups around cloud-based services that provide visibility and control, and not just in AWS or Azure, but across those platforms. Because the security team can't be massive. I need to have a solution that's going to tell me, regardless of the flavor I'm tasting, it's going to actually show me what my risk profile looks like. And the other area which is similar is data discovery and management. So with, again, DevSecOps and so on, multiple copies of our data, the data that we care about, whether it's our employee information or our customer data or whatever it is, whatever might happen to be sensitive to us, there are multiple copies of that in your environments. Get used to that fact. If you think you have one copy of an employee database, no, you don't. You've got multiple copies. You may not be aware of all of them. You may not know where they are and so on, but you need to be aware of where they are.
Yeah.
Almost all of the breaches happening lately have been data that's just sitting in S3 buckets with no access lists on them, and the data is getting exposed. So companies wrapping around the need for data management and data discovery inside of your environments is another area where I think it's really great to see that.
Awesome. Those are great points. Sivan, I'd love to hear from you as well.
So I definitely agree with Justin regarding the data discovery, what we call, in other words, dark data, and the things that companies are not aware that they store or where they store them. And that's definitely one thing that we should be aware of. And during I think that actually in the past, we've seen many companies that were afraid of the whole cloud concept and to transition to cloud and to adopt cloud-based solutions. And now they're actually embracing it. So I think that the pandemic, it's also a great opportunity for companies to adopt more cloud-based solutions, because I do think they have many advantages in terms of control and visibility. So it's, in my opinion, it looks certain that in the future organizations will adopt more cloud-based solutions, and especially with as you mentioned, the hybrid working strategy that combine the work from home and from the office. I also think that we will see more unified solutions for security efforts, and I think actually SASE, it's a great example of it. SASE architecture, secure access service edge, which is it's one of the great examples for a single cloud edge and the unification of security tools. And I think it's relevant now more than ever. It's gonna make IT managers' life easier. And even for individuals, I think we're going to be very surprised to see more individuals that are managing their data and and their work and personal data in the cloud and using security solutions. We mentioned dark data. So I also think it's important to mention the term shadow IT. I think that I mentioned personal and individuals that implementing security solutions by themselves. I think that's another thing that we're going to see more and more, but that's another challenge that companies will have, how they manage those shadow IT solutions remotely when their people are working at home.
Yeah, it sounds to me like what I'm hearing from both of you is there's the move to the cloud. It's here. We need visibility. We need unification. We need to streamline for the IT management and also to make, cybersecurity easier to adopt for the end user as well. So,
Definitely.
yeah. All right. So we're going to move into the Q&A. I invite everybody to please submit your questions if you haven't already. I already have a couple questions that have come in now, so I'm going to go ahead and start with those. Just a second. Oh, sorry, I think I just pulled up the slides. Oh, here, our questions. Now it pulls up. Okay, anyhow, now we know we're going to start the questions. So here's one that's come in. Is VPN the right and sufficient solution to protect the company's endpoints? Are there other types of solutions? I don't know. Sivan? It looks like her connection might have dropped.
I'll take that one. So, yeah, I mean, look, VPN's a tool. I mean, it's been around for a really long time. The way we use it today is similar to the way we used it in the past, but it's one of those, it's a sort of horses for courses thing. Will VPN be sufficient for whatever it is you want to use it for? I think that, originally there was these, point-to-point solutions we would put in there. Years ago, I'm old enough to be around long enough for when companies would actually connect to each other with circuits. Believe it or not, people used to do that. You used to have to get very creative with access lists and so on back then to be able to run situations like that. Then we had virtual circuits. VPNs can work quite well, particularly IPsec VPN gives you a decent amount of visibility and control into what's going on in the environment. And there are some pretty feature-rich tools which can allow you to understand who's going where and what's happening and various other things. So VPN, it's sort of like a Swiss Army knife if you need to be able to connect companies to each other. There are other methods to do it. There's a significant amount of cloud platform solutions at the moment that can facilitate connectivity via cloud environments, not necessarily using VPN, using a variety of solutions. So it just really depends at what layer you want to connect or to allow connections. And then, of course, if you have a trusted provider that you're working with, they have the ability to connect you across their fabric, across their backbone in a secure fashion, which is not a new technology, but I think a technology, as Sivan just said in answering the last question, a lot more people are beginning to embrace cloud-based solutions where they never would in the past. So I think we're continuing to follow along a trend of gradually people opening up and being able to embrace solutions that they have confidence in.
Cool. Sivan, what are your thoughts about the sufficiency of the legacy VPN and what other kind of solutions are out there?
Well, so I think everyone who knows me knows that I'm a fan of cloud-based solutions, and that I definitely think that the legacy VPN are not relevant anymore for the new reality that we're facing in. I think that when you need to scale fast, when you need to move to remote work in one day or in one night, like we've seen now during the pandemic, you just can't do that with legacy VPN or any other legacy solution. That's the huge advantage of cloud-based solution, especially when it comes to remote access. That's the very basic level of security that we need to provide to remote work in order to help our employees working remotely. And also the protocols that we're using for the traditional VPNs are approved as unsecured protocols. So mean, we don't want to give the attackers all the data. Like,
There you go.
we want them to work hard, right? We want to make their life harder. So, that's what I think. I just think it's just not relevant anymore. And if someone is mentioning VPN around me, I'm just like, I understand the mindset of the organizations, but I do understand that it's hard to move to cloud-based solutions when you already have in place all those other legacy solutions, especially if you're an enterprise. I know how hard it is. I worked with legacy solutions for a long time, so I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that I think that once you're moving to cloud-based solutions, you actually understand how many efforts you had to invest in all the other solutions and how you're actually making your life easier. And again, it's an opportunity to rethink about policies, to rethink about our security strategy, and to move forward. We're already living in the revolution, or the digital revolution, so we can't stay behind. We just can't.
Yeah, I have another question here, and it's tied to what we were just discussing. How is cloud remote solution more secure than VPN? So I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can talk about why there might be a perception of hardware being the better option, and then what are the advantages of looking at cloud instead? Justin, would you want to go ahead?
Sure. I mean, look, part of it is philosophy, part of it is the development of new technologies and so on. I think that, years ago, we built our own data centers, we installed our own hardware, we configured all those devices, and so much of what we cared about from a security and operational perspective happened inside of our own walls, if you can describe it that way. And over time, the perimeters dissipated, and we've shifted things out that used to be in. I had, many years ago as a network engineer, I had colleagues that said to me, like, absolutely not will I ever let a partner manage my firewall configuration, for example. Right. Well, managed security services are doing very well, thank you very much. Right? People would say as well that, their directories, their authorization schemas and all that kind of stuff would always be internal. Like, I'm never going to let my usernames and passwords and entitlements and so on leave my environment. Guess what? There's a lot of really good companies out there that are doing that kind of work too. So we've all kind of shifted to embrace those sorts of things. The benefits for not running your own hardware and not having your own VPN and legacy VPN, managing all those configs and the exchanging of certificates and keys and all that sort of stuff, and that's sort of, if you like, tangible network-based connectivity. There's still a lot of that out there. It's in fact the vast majority still of VPN connections and so on. But the ability to sort of step back and say, well, should I be doing that? Should I still embrace hardware? Should I still be worrying about firmware versions and whether I need to upgrade that device and who's got access to it and all of that configuration overhead, if you like? I'm already using this cloud platform that provides me with these other services. If they provide this as well, why wouldn't I use something like that? Because then I can move my office to wherever I want, and it just continues to work. So as long as you get comfortable with the amount of control that you have over it, it shouldn't really matter where it lives.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sivan, do you have anything else that you'd like to add to that?
I think Justin made it.
I basically just agreed with everything.
We're all agreeing with each other. Okay, great. So I have another question here. Should VPN access to server with multi-user or single user?
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I think we might be missing.
But maybe it's related to single sign-on or something like that, or to identity. So we definitely recommend to enable multi-factor authentication, even if you use a VPN and single sign-on when you're access to your resources.
I'm not certain this is where the question is going, but there is an element when you do set up VPN tunnels, there is a configuration flag which allows for split tunnel or not. I don't know if that's what the reference is for the question, but it's a good idea to turn split tunneling off. because of course it can bridge your home network or your remote network with another network that you may not trust. So from a security perspective, if you're using VPN, turn off split tunneling.
Got you. Okay, great. I have another one that just came through there, which looks really interesting. Do you believe that home smart devices, IoT, have enough technology to guarantee the safety of people who are not IT experts?
No.
No.
So elaborate. Tell us.
IoT is relatively new. These hyper-connected devices, there are some scanning tools that you can get if you want to look at your Wi-Fi network at home, and it'll tell you about everything that's connected to your Wi-Fi network. I guarantee you that most of you will be surprised. You'll be surprised to learn that your fridge is Wi-Fi capable, or your smart door lock, or your garage door opener is sitting on your Wi-Fi, and it is an IoT device, and it has capabilities. It also sits on your Wi-Fi network, therefore it can use the bandwidth of your network and potentially compromise other things. So when you're moving fast, particularly building consumer devices, I worked at a company that built consumer devices. It's very hard to manage software and firmware on remote devices. Because of that difficulty, you're likely running the firmware the device shipped with, and it may never get upgraded. So you have to kind of live in the world where your fridge isn't going to, automatically go and get its firmware upgrade and download a new version. So you're going to be running old firmware, old software inside of your network at home, and that's always a bad idea. And these devices have the ability to reach outbound without asking for your permission. Security is one of the corners that gets cut in IoT, and that's just the way it is because they're trying to move really fast and innovate quickly. There are very, very few IoT devices that have any security that would give me any confidence.
Innovation is taking the precedence there. Yeah.
Yeah, speed to market, totally.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the best way to show that is that I'm sometimes doing it. I'm going to, and I also do those exercises sometimes with my students. If you Google shodan.io, you'll see all the open devices and all the open webcams, and there are always open ports, open webcams. No people that are using those home devices with no passwords. So and it's public many times, and everyone can get access to it and see it. So I don't know who asked the question, but you can Google shodan.io and look for the open devices around your
Have fun.
assignment. But definitely agree. I mean, we cannot guarantee that it's secure.
Great. Well, we got a really interesting question. I'm just going to pull it up now. When in the office, we have some physical security practices that we're supposed to do, such as locking our computer when we step away or shredding any sensitive documents by the end of the day. Are there any physical security concerns for the home that should be practiced? I think that's a really interesting question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I love the question. I think it's, the whole concept of security started from physical security. And now when I'm saying it, I also think, I remember when I served in the army and I get back home every weekend with my gun. I was supposed to lock this gun behind 2 locks and to make sure that no one knows when I'm hiding my gun, and etc. And now when we're going home with our computers, no one tells us where to store it, what to do with it, and we changed it's a different mindset. So I think that in the new world, those locks are, as we mentioned, are passwords, multi-factor authentications, and all the extra layers of security. And I think it's a very good point. I mean, we're at home. We mentioned IoT devices. We have Alexa that many people are using it, and many times, it can be recording while we're working, and if we're talking about confidential data. So there are many things in terms of physical security that I can think about that are directly related to our new reality, even though we think we're only using cloud-based and things like that. So I love the questions. I think it's important, and I would recommend to use extra layers, as we mentioned, multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, remote access, cloud-based solutions, etc.
Justin, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I think another additional one I think companies should be doing is encrypting hard drives, because things get lost, things get stolen. That's just the way it goes. I think encrypting hard drives is a good one. I think and we've been trying to do this from a security perspective. We've been trying to get users and our employees and so on to do this for many, many years. Is we want your daily behaviors to mimic the ones that we would like to see when you're at work. So if there's controls at work, for example, where you've got to lock your screen when you walk away from your laptop and all that kind of stuff, you should do those things at home too. It should just become part of who you are. You might say that, well, it's my home, so random people aren't going to walk by the way they might do in an office building. Well, that may be true, but I think that it's just one of those sort of, it's a discipline thing. It's just a habit that we would like to get people into. I think it would improve greatly. But I think if our home practices should sort of mimic our work practices to a large extent, given we're all working from home most of the time.
It is our office now. So I have 2 more questions that have come in. We'll see how much time. I mean, I'm really excited to see all the interesting questions coming through. So let's see what we can fit into the time. The first question here, can you brief more about the security access server architecture? Would either of you like to take that one?
Security server architecture?
Yeah, security access server architecture.
Maybe they're
referring to SASE. Yeah, I think they might be referring to secure access service edge. So Sivan, maybe you want to go ahead and start with this one.
Well, yeah, so SASE is the cloud, it's a new cloud architecture model that combines the different functions of network and security solutions into basically a unified cloud security platform to be delivered as a service without any or minimal hardware and applications involved. It's a new model. It's the term SASE coined by Gartner, and basically it allows IT teams to easily connect and secure all of their organization's network and users in a pretty agile, cost-effective, and scalable way. So, I mean, that's what we're doing. I'm speaking with many customers during my day-to-day job, and I think that, as we mentioned, because of the new reality that we're living in, we see customers that actually appreciate this new model, this new kind of architecture. And what we're doing is we're trying to help them to optimize their existing network by adopting this new model, this new SASE architecture.
Awesome. Justin, anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, just that I think it's a developing area. There's a number of companies that are focusing here. The benefits being that it's this sort of edge fabric architecture where we can be close to your users. They can't be too far away. There won't be any latency there. There won't be any hoops for them to jump through. They just come to one place. So I think it makes an awful lot of sense for a lot of these technologies to sort of collapse into one platform, if you like, and allow companies to be able to use them. It's a pretty nimble solution.
Okay, great. Another question here. Shadow IT solution, should we adopt or not? What would you all say?
I guess we answered that now. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, from one end, if you don't have any security solutions in place that your company is providing, so okay. I mean, it's better to have something other than not having anything. But I think that if you're a responsible employee, you would like to let your IT manager to know that you have those kind of personal security solutions in place. Or on the other end, I would recommend to IT managers to guide their employees not to do that, or if they do that, so to report them, so they will be able to monitor it, because it can be hard to manage all those shadow IT solutions.
And what do you think, Justin?
Well, I've had the honor and privilege of being a CIO in the past, so I have deep feelings about this. I've seen, honestly, shadow IT a number of times, and most of the time it is to the detriment of security and efficiency and so on within a company. However, I did see it once where it worked, where there was a large engineering organization that moved really quickly and needed their own technical IT team to support them. So what's incumbent upon the security leaders and the business leaders at a company like that is to ensure that they get to do that, but they get to do it inside of a safe space. So that you have to have overarching security controls that they can't undermine and they can't tunnel around and various other things, although they may be able to. You have to sort of set those guidelines and those guardrails and put them in place and say, look, you want to move fast and adopt technologies and so on, that's fine. I'm going to give you an environment within which you can do that. But you can't sacrifice the integrity of the complete environment. So it can work. It really depends on the culture of the company, and it doesn't really work for everybody. But specific engineering-driven organizations sometimes can have their own technical team supporting them, and as long as they understand the rules of engagement, it can actually work.
Got you. Okay, great. Well, it looks like we're getting to closing up the hour here. So I want to give you all the floor for anything else that you might want to mention, any other kind of recommendations you think that we should all have in mind right now when it comes to our cybersecurity posture, any closing notes that you have. Justin, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a new environment. We're all sort of, even though we're months and months into it now, I still think every day is a school day and we're kind of figuring things out as we go along. The fundamentals are the same as they've always been. Don't share your passwords, use good ones. Treat your laptop like it's valuable to you. Always know where it is and who's got access to it and all that sort of stuff. Take a look at your Wi-Fi network. If you see something, say something. It's an old security axiom, but if you're seeing something weird happening when you're on your home network, alert your security teams, alert your IT teams, and say, hey, look, this is weird.
Yeah.
And sort of ask those questions and look for advice. We're having to figure out so much on our own right now that all of us have resources available to us to be able to ask questions and so on. So
better safe than sorry.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sivan, would love to hear from you as well if you have any kind of closing remarks or thoughts about where we go from here.
Well, as I mentioned before, I think we live in a very exciting and uncertain times, but we do know where things are going and that we're going to use more and more cloud-based solutions and cloud in general, and I think that all what we mentioned here before, to secure your home network, to make sure you have the right remote access solution in place, using strong passwords, backup, patching, and all those things, it's extremely important. And I will end with what you said, Justin: reporting and collaborate with your IT. I think IT managers now more than ever need to build a relationship with their users and a trust with the users, so they will feel so the users will feel comfortable to report and to reach out if something happened and won't be afraid to do that. So those are my closing comments.
Thank you so much, Sivan. Thank you both so much for being here today. I really feel like it was a very valuable webinar with a lot of great insights. I just want to pull up our contact information for everybody. Sorry, here we go. So that you can reach us after the webinar. If you have any more questions or thoughts after this, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our website is www.perimeter81.com, and Sauce Labs, www.saucelabs.com. We would love to hear from you. We really appreciate you all taking the time, providing such great questions. And we hope to see you at the next webinar. So thank you again, and have a great and safe cybersecure day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.